The wrench slipped from my greasy fingers at exactly 11:47 p.m., clattering against the concrete floor of my garage like a death knell. My phone had buzzed with that particular tone, the one I'd assigned to Caroline's messages back when I still thought receiving them was a good thing. Landed in Paris, at the hotel. Will call soon. I stared at the screen, engine oil still coating my hands, the smell of motor fluid and betrayal thick in the midnight air. 12 words, 12 perfectly crafted, emotionally sterile words that somehow managed to feel colder than the October wind rattling through the gaps in my garage door. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. My name is Jack Morrison, and I fix things for a living. Cars, mostly. Sometimes motorcycles. Occasionally the odd lawnmower or generator when money gets tight. What I apparently can't fix is a marriage that's been limping along on fumes for the better part of 2 years. Caroline, my wife of 15 years, mother of our daughter Sophie, and as of 6 months ago, senior partner at Whitman & Associates, had announced this Paris trip exactly 1 week ago over microwaved leftovers and the evening news. It's a work thing, she'd said, not looking up from her phone. Well, mostly work. Jennifer's coming with me. You remember Jennifer, right? From college? I remembered Jennifer. Blonde, bubbly, the kind of woman who dotted her E's with little hearts well into her 30s. The kind of woman who'd never met a married man she couldn't flirt with, including me, right in front of my wife at last year's Christmas party. Sure, I'd said, because what else do you say when your wife announces she's jetting off to the City of Light with her college roommate while you're left to explain to your 19-year-old daughter why mommy needs a European vacation from her European vacation of a life? But now, standing in my garage at nearly midnight, staring at that text, something felt wrong. Not just wrong, catastrophically, gut-wrenchingly, life-alteringly wrong. Maybe it was the tone. Caroline used to end her texts with little hearts, or at least an XO. This read like a weather report. Maybe it was the timing. 11:47 p.m. meant it was nearly 6 a.m. in Paris. Who texts their husband at dawn from their hotel room when they're supposedly exhausted from international travel? Or maybe it was the fact that I'd spent the last 3 months watching my wife transform from the small-town girl I'd married into someone I barely recognized. Someone who bought designer handbags while I clipped coupons. Someone who'd started working late every Tuesday and Thursday, always with the same excuse. Big case, honey. You understand. I understood, all right. I understood that the woman who used to steal my hoodies and leave little notes in my lunchbox had become a stranger, who flinched when I touched her shoulder and couldn't remember the last time we'd had a real conversation that didn't involve household logistics or Sophie's college expenses. The garage door to the kitchen creaked open, and Sophie's head appeared, her dark hair, my hair, thankfully, not Caroline's bottle blonde, messy from sleep. Dad? It's almost midnight. Are you okay? Fine, sweetheart, just finishing up the Mustang. She stepped into the garage, and I noticed she was clutching her phone. At 19, Sophie was never more than arm's length from that device. It was practically a surgical attachment. Mom texted me too, she said, and something in her voice made me look up from my phone. She said Paris is beautiful and that she and Jennifer are having the time of their lives. That's nice, I managed, though the words tasted like rust in my mouth. Sophie's phone buzzed and she glanced at it, then quickly looked away. But not quickly enough. In that split second, I caught a glimpse of the message preview on her screen. He bought the tickets. Can't wait to see you both under the Eiffel Tower. The sender's name was partially visible. Jen. My world tilted sideways. Sophie, I said carefully, can I see that message? What message? But her face had gone pale, and she was backing toward the door. The one from Jennifer, about the tickets. Dad, I don't think... Sophie. My voice came out harder than I intended. "Show me the phone." She hesitated, then handed it over with the resignation of someone who knew the jig was up. I scrolled to the full message, sent 20 minutes ago. "He bought the tickets. Can't wait to see you both under the Eiffel Tower. Your mom deserves this after everything with your dad. Luke is such a romantic." The phone nearly slipped from my suddenly numb fingers. Luke, not Jennifer. Luke. "Dad," Sophie started, but I was already moving, pushing past her into the house, taking the stairs 2 at a time to our bedroom. Caroline's bedroom, really, since I'd been sleeping in the guest room for the past month after one of our increasingly frequent fights. I tore through Caroline's dresser, her closet, her nightstand. In the bottom drawer, hidden beneath a stack of legal briefs, I found what I was looking for: her old phone. The one she'd claimed was broken and had replaced 3 months ago. The screen was cracked, but it still worked, and it was full of messages, months of messages. "Can't wait to see you again. Luke. Tell Jack you're working late. I'll pick you up at 7. Luke. The Paris tickets are booked. Just you and me, finally. Luke. I love you, Caroline. Leave him. Luke. I scrolled back further, watching my marriage disintegrate in real time through a timeline of increasingly intimate messages. The first one was dated 8 months ago. A simple, "nice to meet you," after what Caroline had described as a boring work conference. By month 3, they were exchanging photos I won't describe. By month 6, they were planning a future together. And by last week, they were booking flights to Paris while I sat downstairs watching Netflix alone, wondering why my wife had become a stranger. My hands were shaking as I grabbed my own phone and called Jennifer's number. It rang 4 times before a sleepy voice answered. "Jack? It's almost midnight. Is everything okay?" "Where are you, Jennifer?" "What? I'm in bed. In Tampa." "Jack, what's going on?" "Tampa. Not Paris." "When did you last talk to Caroline?" "I don't know, maybe 2 weeks ago." "Jack, you're scaring me. Is Caroline okay?" I hung up without answering, because I honestly didn't know if Caroline was okay. What I knew was that my wife of 15 years was in Paris with a man named Luke while I sat in our bedroom, her bedroom, surrounded by the evidence of the most thorough betrayal I'd ever experienced. Sophie appeared in the doorway, tears streaming down her face. "Dad, I'm sorry. I didn't know how to tell you." "How long have you known?" 2 months. I saw them together at that restaurant downtown. The fancy one. I confronted Mom, and she begged me not to say anything. She said she was going to tell you after Paris, that she was going to ask for a divorce, but she needed time to figure things out. And you believed her? I wanted to. I'm sorry, Dad. I'm so sorry. I looked at my daughter, this beautiful, intelligent young woman who'd been forced to carry the weight of her mother's lies for 2 months, and felt something inside me break. Not just break. Shatter completely. "Go to bed, Sophie. We'll talk in the morning." After she left, I sat on the edge of the bed Caroline and I had shared for 15 years and composed a text message. "Hope you're enjoying Paris with Luke. Divorce papers will be waiting when you get back. Don't bother coming home to pack. I'll have your things shipped wherever you want them." I attached a photo I'd taken of the message thread between her and Luke, then hit send. Then I blocked her number. Within an hour, my phone was ringing. Caroline's parents, her sister, her brother, even Jennifer, who'd apparently been brought up to speed on the situation. I answered none of them. Instead, I opened a beer, sat in my garage, and started planning the systematic destruction of everyone who had betrayed me. Because if there's one thing 15 years of marriage had taught me, it's that Caroline Morrison, soon to be Caroline something else, had a lot more to lose than just a husband. And I was going to make sure she lost every bit of it. The next morning brought 3 things: a hangover that felt like a construction crew was jackhammering inside my skull, 17 missed calls from various members of Caroline's family, and a visit from Detective Ray Kowalski of the local police department. I answered the door in yesterday's clothes, unshaven and probably smelling like a distillery. Ray and I went way back. We'd played football together in high school, and I'd fixed his patrol car more times than either of us could count. "Jack," he said, removing his hat, "we need to talk. If this is about Caroline, she's in Paris screwing some French guy named Luc. Anything else is between her and her lawyer." Ray's eyebrows shot up. "Actually, this is about the Porsche that got vandalized at the airport last night. Security cameras caught a guy who looks a lot like you taking a crowbar to a very expensive car." I blinked. "A Porsche?" "Silver 911. Belongs to a Lucas Beaumont. French national, here on a work visa. Someone smashed every window, slashed all 4 tires, and left a note that said, 'Stay out of my country, homewrecker.'" The pieces clicked together. Lucas. And apparently, he'd left his car at the airport when he and my wife flew off to their romantic getaway. "Sounds like someone with a grudge," I said carefully. "Jack." Ray's voice carried a warning. "The cameras show a guy your height, your build, wearing a jacket that looks exactly like that Carhartt you're wearing right now, same one you've had for 5 years. I looked down at my jacket, then back at Ray. "You arresting me?" "Not yet. But Lucas Beaumont is pressing charges and airport security is pulling high-def footage as we speak. Whatever's going on with your marriage, destroying property isn't the answer." After Ray left, I sat in my kitchen drinking coffee and contemplating the fact that I'd apparently committed a felony in my sleep-deprived, rage-fueled state. The smart thing would be to call a lawyer, maybe try to work out some kind of plea deal. Instead, I called in sick to work and started making a list. At the top of the list, Jenna Kowalski, Ray's younger sister, Caroline's best friend since college, and the woman who'd been helping my wife coordinate her affair for months. Second on the list, Caroline's law firm, where she'd been using work trips and client meetings as cover for her extracurricular activities. Third, Luke himself and whatever business had brought him to our little corner of Ohio. Fourth, Sophie, who needed to understand that keeping secrets for cheating parents wasn't protecting anyone. And finally, Caroline's parents, Robert and Patricia Whitman, who'd never thought I was good enough for their precious daughter and were about to find out exactly why. I started with Jenna. Jenna Kowalski lived in a pristine townhouse on the good side of town, the kind of place with a 3-car garage and a lawn that looked like it belonged on a golf course. She worked as a marketing consultant, which as far as I could tell meant she helped rich people figure out new ways to separate other people from their money. She answered the door in yoga pants and a tank top, her blonde hair pulled back in a ponytail. She'd always been attractive in that high-maintenance way that required 2 hours and $50 worth of products to achieve the natural look. "Jack, what a surprise. Caroline didn't mention you were—" She stopped, probably because my expression made it clear this wasn't a social call. "We need to talk, Jenna." "I don't think that's a good idea. Caroline said you two were having some problems, and I don't want to get in the middle of—" "You've been in the middle of it for 8 months. I pushed past her into her living room, which looked like a furniture showroom, everything white and beige and expensive. "You helped her plan the Paris trip. You covered for her when she was meeting Luke. You've been lying to my face for months." Jenna's face went pale, but she recovered quickly. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Really?" I pulled out my phone and started reading from Caroline's old messages. "Jenna's covering for me tonight. Tell Jack we're having a girls' night. Jenna booked the hotel for Luke and me. Thank God for Jenna. I couldn't do this without her." Each quote hit like a physical blow. Jenna sank onto her pristine white couch, her hands shaking. "Jack, please, you have to understand. Caroline was miserable. She said you two hadn't been happy for years. She said you were distant, that you never talked anymore, that you'd basically become roommates. So that justified helping her cheat? She was going to leave you anyway. Luke he made her remember what it felt like to be desired, to be appreciated." The rage that had been simmering since last night suddenly boiled over. Appreciated? I worked 60-hour weeks to put her through law school. I took care of Sophie when Caroline was building her career. I supported every dream, every goal, every ambition she ever had. And the moment she started making more money than me, I became disposable. That's not... It is exactly that. I stood up, towering over her. And you helped her dispose of me. You helped her lie to our daughter. You helped her destroy our family. Jenna was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks. I'm sorry, Jack, I really am. But Caroline's my best friend. What was I supposed to do? You were supposed to tell her that cheating on her husband was wrong. You were supposed to tell her to get counseling or get a divorce or at least have the decency to end our marriage before starting a new relationship. I headed for the door, then turned back. By the way, you might want to call your brother. Seems I destroyed Luke's car last night. Ray's investigating, and I'm pretty sure your name is going to come up as an accessory. Accessory to what? Conspiracy to commit adultery, if there is such a charge. If not, I'm sure we can find something else. You did help them book hotel rooms, didn't you? Using false pretenses? That might be fraud. I was making it up as I went along, but the look of terror on Jenna's face suggested she didn't know that. My next stop was Caroline's law firm. Whitman and Associates occupied the top 3 floors of the tallest building in downtown. The lobby was all marble and brass, designed to intimidate clients into believing they were getting their money's worth. I'd been here exactly twice in the 5 years since Caroline made partner, once for the Christmas party where Jenna had flirted with me, and once to pick Caroline up after her car broke down. The receptionist, a young woman with perfect teeth and a practiced smile, looked up as I approached. I'm here to see Caroline Morrison, I said. I'm sorry, Mrs. Morrison is out of the country on business. Can I schedule you an appointment for next week? Actually, I'm her husband, and I need to speak with someone about her recent travel expenses. The smile faltered slightly. I'm not sure I understand. Caroline's been charging personal trips to the firm's account, Paris specifically, with her boyfriend. I have documentation. This was also mostly made up, but I'd learned that confidence could take you surprisingly far in situations like this. Let me get Mr. Whitman, she said, reaching for her phone. 5 minutes later, I was sitting across from Richard Whitman himself, Caroline's boss and the founding partner of the firm. He was exactly what you'd expect from a successful lawyer. Silver hair, expensive suit, the kind of tan that came from weekend golf at the country club. Mr. Morrison, he said, settling behind his massive desk. Sarah mentioned you had some concerns about Caroline's travel expenses. I have concerns about a lot of things, Mr. Whitman, starting with the fact that my wife has been using work trips as cover for an 8-month affair with a man named Lucas Beaumont. Whitman's poker face was excellent, but I caught the slight tightening around his eyes. That's a very serious accusation. It's not an accusation. It's a fact. I placed Caroline's old phone on his desk. 8 months of messages, photos, hotel reservations, all of it charged to your firm's account while Caroline claimed to be working. Whitman picked up the phone, scrolled through a few messages, then set it down carefully. Mr. Morrison, I understand you're upset, but Caroline's personal life is... Her personal life became your business the moment she started billing the firm for her affair. How many of those client meetings were actually romantic dinners? How many of those work trips were weekend getaways with her boyfriend? I'll need to review our records. You do that. And while you're at it, you might want to review the ethics rules for attorneys in this state. I'm pretty sure billing personal expenses to clients is considered fraud. I stood to leave, then turned back. Oh, and Mr. Whitman, Caroline's going to be asking for a leave of absence when she gets back from Paris. Something about needing time to figure things out. Just thought you should know that figuring things out involves divorce proceedings and probably a criminal investigation into her billing practices. Again, mostly bullshit. But the look on Whitman's face suggested he was taking it seriously. By the time I got home, Sophie was waiting for me with red eyes and a suitcase. "I'm going to stay with Grandma and Grandpa Whitman for a while," she said. "Sophie, we need to talk about this." "There's nothing to talk about, Dad. You've spent the day destroying Mom's life. Jenna called me crying. Mom's boss called her in Paris. You're acting like a psychopath." "I'm acting like a man whose wife and daughter lied to him for months. Mom was going to tell you when? After the divorce papers were filed? After she'd moved in with Luke? After she'd taken half of everything I'd worked for and disappeared to Paris permanently?" Sophie's face crumpled. "She said she still loved you. She said it was complicated." "Love isn't complicated, sweetheart. Love doesn't sneak around. Love doesn't lie. Love doesn't make your daughter keep secrets that tear her apart inside. But destroying her career, trying to get her arrested, that's not love either, Dad. That's revenge." She was right, of course. It was revenge. Pure, calculated, systematic revenge. And I was just getting started. Your mother made her choice, Sophie. Now she gets to live with the consequences. After Sophie left, I sat in my empty house and made more phone calls. To Caroline's clients, asking innocent questions about their recent bills. To the local newspaper, suggesting they might want to look into billing irregularities at the city's most prestigious law firm. To Lucas Beaumont's employer, a consulting firm based in Chicago, sharing some interesting information about their employees' extracurricular activities. By evening, my phone was ringing constantly. Caroline's parents, her siblings, her colleagues, even a reporter from the local paper. I answered none of them. Instead, I opened another beer, sat in my garage, and waited for the real fireworks to begin. Because if Caroline thought her life was complicated before, she was about to discover what complicated really meant. 3 days later, the dominoes started falling. The first to go was Lucas Beaumont's work visa. Apparently, consulting firms don't appreciate employees who use company resources to conduct international affairs with married clients. A few well-placed phone calls to his Chicago office, combined with documentation of his relationship with Caroline, had resulted in his immediate termination and a recommendation to immigration services that his visa be reviewed. The second domino was Caroline's law firm. Richard Whitman had done exactly what I'd hoped he would do. He'd launched an internal investigation into Caroline's billing practices. What he'd found wasn't pretty. 8 months of personal expenses charged to client accounts. Dinners with Luke billed as client meetings. Hotel rooms billed as business travel. Even some of her shopping trips had been disguised as research expenses. The third domino was the most satisfying: Jenna Kowalski's marriage. I hadn't planned on destroying Jenna's life, but sometimes collateral damage is inevitable. When her husband Mike found out she'd been helping Caroline cheat, and more importantly, when he found out she'd been lying to him about her whereabouts during Caroline's girls' nights, he'd drawn some very reasonable conclusions about his own wife's fidelity. The fact that those conclusions were wrong didn't make them any less devastating to their marriage. I was getting updates on all of this from Ray, who, despite being Jenna's brother, seemed to find a certain amount of professional satisfaction in watching my systematic campaign unfold. "You know this is all going to blow back on you eventually," he said, sitting across from me at Murphy's bar, the kind of dive where cops and mechanics could drink in peace without worrying about running into lawyers or marketing consultants. "Probably," I agreed, taking a sip of my beer. "But Caroline's life is falling apart faster than mine is, so I'm calling it a win." "The Porsche thing is still hanging over your head. Lucas Beaumont wants his pound of flesh." "Lucas Beaumont is about to be deported. Something tells me he's got bigger problems than a vandalized car." Ray shook his head. "You're playing with fire, Jack. I've been getting burned for 8 months without even knowing it. At least now I'm the one holding the matches." That's when my phone rang. Unknown number, international prefix. Caroline. I let it go to voicemail, then played the message on speaker. "Jack, please, we need to talk. I know you're angry, and you have every right to be, but what you're doing is destroying innocent people. Jenna had nothing to do with this. My colleagues had nothing to do with this. Please, please call me back. Her voice was shaky, desperate. Good. You going to call her back? Ray asked. Nope. Jack. Ray, let me ask you something. If your wife spent 8 months lying to your face, screwing another man, and planning to divorce you without even having the decency to end the marriage first, what would you do? Ray was quiet for a long moment. I'd probably kill the guy. Well, I'm not a cop, so I can't get away with murder. I have to settle for destroying lives the legal way. This isn't legal, Jack. This is revenge. And revenge has a way of eating you alive from the inside. Maybe he was right. Maybe I was letting my anger consume me. But for the first time in months, I felt like I had control over something. For the first time since I'd found those messages, I felt powerful instead of pathetic. And I wasn't done yet. The next morning brought a knock on my door. This time it wasn't Ray. This time it was Robert and Patricia Whitman, Caroline's parents, looking like they'd aged 10 years in the past week. Robert Whitman was a retired bank president, the kind of man who'd never worked with his hands and couldn't understand why anyone would choose to. He'd made it clear from the moment Caroline brought me home that he considered me a temporary phase, something his daughter would outgrow once she realized she could do better. Patricia was a former beauty queen turned society wife, all pearls and passive aggression. She'd spent 15 years making subtle comments about my clothes, my job, my lack of a college degree, and my general unsuitability as a husband for her precious daughter. Now they stood on my doorstep looking desperate and defeated. We need to talk, Robert said. I let them into my living room, noting how Patricia's nose wrinkled slightly at the decor. Caroline had wanted to redecorate for years, but we'd never had the money. Now I was glad we hadn't bothered. You're destroying our daughter, Patricia said without preamble. Your daughter destroyed herself. I'm just making sure everyone knows about it. She made a mistake. She made 8 months of mistakes. She lied to me, to Sophie, to her colleagues, to her clients. She committed billing fraud and adultery and probably half a dozen other things I haven't figured out yet. Robert leaned forward. What do you want, Jack? Money? We can pay for the damage to Lucas's car. We can make this go away. I don't want your money, Robert. I never wanted your money. Then what? I looked at these two people who'd spent 15 years treating me like something they'd scraped off their shoes and felt a cold satisfaction settle in my chest. I want Caroline to face the consequences of her choices. I want her to lose everything she cares about the same way she made me lose everything I cared about. She's our daughter, Patricia whispered. She was my wife. That didn't stop her from betraying me. After they left, I called Sophie. She answered on the 4th ring, her voice cold. What do you want, Dad? I want to know if you're okay. I'm fine. Grandma and Grandpa are taking good care of me. Sophie, I know you think I'm the villain here, but you are the villain here, Dad. Mom made a mistake, but you're destroying her entire life. Her job, her friends, her reputation. Even Luke got deported because of you. Luke got deported because he was here illegally and using company resources to conduct an affair. You know what I mean. I did know what she meant. And she was right. I was systematically destroying everyone who had betrayed me, and I was enjoying it. Your mother had choices, Sophie. She could have asked for a divorce. She could have gone to counseling. She could have talked to me about whatever was wrong with our marriage. Instead, she chose to lie and cheat and make you complicit in her deception. She was scared. She was selfish. There's a difference. Sophie hung up on me. That evening, I got a call from an unexpected source, Lucas Beaumont himself. Mr. Morrison, he said, his French accent thick with anger, we need to talk. I don't think we do. I think we do. I am in Paris, yes, but I will be back. And when I return, we will settle this like men. You mean like the man who screwed my wife for 8 months? Or like the man who got deported for visa fraud? I love Caroline. You do not deserve her. You're probably right, but she was mine to lose, not yours to steal. She was never yours. She told me. She has not been happy for years. You ignore her, you take her for granted, you make her feel like she is nothing. Maybe that was true. Maybe I had taken Caroline for granted. Maybe I had been distant and inattentive, and everything else she'd apparently complained about to her lover. But that still didn't justify what she'd done. Lucas, I said, let me give you some advice. Stay in Paris. Find a nice French woman who isn't married to someone else. Because if you come back here, if you try to settle this like men, you're going to discover that this particular man has a lot less to lose than you do. I hung up and immediately called Ray. I need a favor, I said. Jack, I can't keep... Lucas Beaumont just threatened me. Called my house, said he was coming back to settle this like men. I need you to document that. Ray sighed. I'll file a report. But Jack, maybe it's time to let this go. Caroline's career is destroyed. Her boyfriend's been deported. Her best friend's marriage is falling apart. Her parents are beside themselves. How much revenge is enough? I thought about that question as I sat in my empty house, drinking beer and listening to the silence where my family used to be. How much revenge was enough? I'd know when I got there. A week later, Caroline came home. I wasn't there when she arrived. I'd made sure of that by taking on an emergency repair job across town. But Sophie called me, sobbing, to tell me that her mother was sitting in our driveway because the locks had been changed and she couldn't get into the house. You changed the locks? Sophie's voice was incredulous. It's my house, Sophie. I can change the locks if I want to. Where is she supposed to go? I don't know. Maybe she should have thought about that before she decided to spend a week in Paris with her boyfriend. By the time I got home, Caroline was gone, but she'd left something behind. A letter tucked under the windshield wiper of my truck. Jack, it began, I know you hate me right now, and I understand why. I made terrible choices, and I hurt you in ways I can never take back. But please, can we talk? Can we try to work this out like adults? I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm asking for it anyway. I love you. I've always loved you. What happened with Luke was a mistake, the biggest mistake of my life. Please don't throw away 15 years of marriage over one mistake. I'm staying at the Holiday Inn on Route 9, room 237. Please come. Please, let's try to fix this. Caroline. I read the letter twice, standing in my driveway as the October wind whipped around me. For just a moment I felt something that might have been hope. Maybe we could work this out. Maybe we could go to counseling, rebuild the trust, find our way back to each other. Then I remembered the messages on her phone. 8 months of I love you sent to another man. 8 months of lies told to my face. 8 months of making our daughter complicit in her deception. I tore the letter into small pieces and let the wind scatter them across the yard. That night, I drove to Murphy's bar and found exactly who I was looking for. Tommy Kowalski, Ray's cousin and Jenna's brother-in-law. Tommy was a private investigator, the kind of guy who specialized in divorce cases and insurance fraud. He was also drunk, which made him talkative. Jack Morrison, he said as I slid into the booth across from him. Heard you've been raising hell all over town. Just setting the record straight. That what we're calling it? Tommy signaled the bartender for another whiskey. Word is you destroyed Jenna's marriage, got Caroline fired, and had her boyfriend deported. That's some serious record straightening. Caroline destroyed Jenna's marriage when she asked her to lie for her. Caroline got herself fired when she committed billing fraud, and Lucas got himself deported when he violated his visa terms. You're a real piece of work, you know that? Maybe I was, but I was a piece of work who was winning. Tommy, I need you to do something for me. I'm not getting involved in your war with your wife. This isn't about Caroline. This is about Sophie. That got his attention. Tommy had kids of his own, and whatever else he was He wasn't the kind of man who would ignore a threat to a child. What about Sophie? She's been keeping secrets for her mother. Big secrets, for months. It's tearing her apart, and I need to know how deep this goes. What kind of secrets? I don't know. That's what I need you to find out. Tommy was quiet for a long moment, staring into his whiskey. You want me to investigate your own daughter? I want you to find out what Caroline has been asking Sophie to hide. Because if she's been manipulating our daughter, if she's been using Sophie as a pawn in this whole thing, then I need to know. And if I find something you don't like, then Caroline's problems are just beginning. 3 days later, Tommy called me with information that made my blood run cold. You need to sit down for this, he said. I was in my garage, working on a transmission rebuild, but I stopped what I was doing and gave him my full attention. Sophie's been lying to you about more than just the affair, Tommy said. She's been meeting with Caroline and Jenna regularly for the past 2 months, not just to keep the secret, to plan Caroline's exit strategy. What do you mean, exit strategy? I mean, Caroline's been systematically moving money out of your joint accounts and into accounts that Sophie has access to. College fund, savings account, even some of your retirement money. Sophie's been helping her do it. The wrench in my hand suddenly felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. How much money? Nearly $40,000. All of it moved in small amounts over the past 8 weeks. All of it done with Sophie's help and her student account information. I sat down heavily on my workbench, trying to process what I was hearing. There's more, Tommy continued. Caroline's been telling people, Sophie included, that you've been abusive. Not physically, but emotionally. She's been building a case that she was afraid to leave you, that she needed to plan her escape carefully because she was scared of how you'd react. That's insane. Is it? Look at what you've done since you found out about the affair, Jack. You've destroyed her career, her friendships, her reputation. You've had her boyfriend deported. You've turned her parents against her. From the outside, it looks like she was right to be afraid of you. The worst part was, he was right. Everything I'd done could be interpreted as the actions of an abusive husband seeking revenge against a wife who'd tried to escape him. So, what you're telling me is that Caroline orchestrated this whole thing. The affair, the money transfers, even Sophie's involvement. It was all part of a plan to make me look like the bad guy when she filed for divorce. That's exactly what I'm telling you. And Jack, it's working. Half the town thinks you're a psychopath who drove his wife into another man's arms. I hung up and sat in my garage for a long time, thinking about everything that had happened over the past 2 weeks. Every move I'd made, every person I'd called, every piece of revenge I'd extracted, all of it had played perfectly into Caroline's narrative. She wasn't the victim of my rage. I was the victim of her manipulation, and Sophie, my own daughter, had been helping her do it. I called Sophie's number. It went straight to voicemail. I called Caroline's hotel. She wasn't taking calls. I called Ray. I need to see the police reports from the Porsche incident. Jack, I can't. Ray, Caroline's been setting me up, the whole thing, the affair, the money, even Sophie's involvement. It's all been designed to make me look like an abusive husband. I need to see those reports because I'm betting there's something in them that doesn't add up. An hour later, Ray met me at the police station with a file folder. The security footage from the airport, he said, sliding it across the table. You're not going to like what you see. I opened the folder and found myself looking at grainy black and white photos of someone destroying Lucas Beaumont's Porsche. Someone who was definitely my height and build, wearing a jacket that looked like mine. Someone who definitely wasn't me. Ray, I said slowly, I didn't do this. What? I was angry enough to do it. I thought about doing it, but I didn't actually do it. I pointed to the timestamp on the photos. This was taken at 2:17 a.m. I was home by 1:30, and I never left the house again that night. How can you prove that? Security system. Caroline insisted we install it 6 months ago after that break-in down the street. Motion sensors, cameras, the whole thing. If I'd left the house after 1:30, it would have recorded it. Ray stared at the photos, then at me. If you didn't do it, who did? I studied the images more carefully. The person in the photos was wearing a Carhartt jacket, identical to mine, but there was something about the way they moved, something about their posture. Sophie, I said quietly. What? It's Sophie. Look at the way she's holding the crowbar. Look at her stance. That's my daughter, Ray. You think your 19-year-old daughter vandalized a car to frame you? I think my 19-year-old daughter has been helping her mother destroy me for months, and this was just part of the plan. I drove home and pulled up the security footage from that night. There it was, clear as day, me arriving home at 1:27 a.m. and never leaving again. But there was something else, something I'd missed before. At 1:45 a.m., a figure left through the back door. Someone small, wearing a jacket identical to mine. Sophie had snuck out, destroyed Lucas's car, and snuck back in, all while I was passed out drunk in my bedroom. My own daughter had committed a felony to frame me. I called Tommy back. I need you to dig deeper into Caroline's plan, I said, because this goes way beyond an affair and some moved money. This is conspiracy. This is fraud. And I think it's been going on a lot longer than 8 months. Jack, maybe you should just walk away. File for divorce, split the assets, move on with your life. No, I said, staring at the security footage of my daughter framing me for a crime. Caroline wanted a war. Now she's got one. But first, I had to figure out exactly who I was fighting, because it was becoming clear that the woman I'd been married to for 15 years wasn't the woman I thought I knew, and neither was my daughter. The truth came out piece by piece over the next week, like a jigsaw puzzle made of betrayal and lies. Tommy's investigation revealed that Caroline's affair with Lucas wasn't her first. There had been others, at least 3 that he could document, going back almost 5 years. Each one had followed the same pattern. Caroline would meet someone at a work conference or social event, begin an affair, then end it when the man became too demanding or the risk of exposure became too great. Lucas was different only because he'd been willing to take her away from her old life entirely. The money transfers were more extensive than I'd initially thought. Over the past year, Caroline had systematically moved nearly $80,000 out of our joint accounts, our retirement funds, and even Sophie's legitimate college fund. She'd been preparing for her exit for months, maybe longer. But the most devastating revelation came when I finally confronted Sophie directly. I found her at her grandparents' house on a Thursday evening, sitting in their pristine living room like a prisoner awaiting sentencing. Robert and Patricia Whitman flanked her on either side, their faces grim. "We need to talk," I said to Sophie. "She doesn't want to talk to you," Patricia said coldly. "I'm not talking to you, Patricia. I'm talking to my daughter." "Your daughter who you've traumatized with your psychotic behavior?" Robert stood up, puffing out his chest like he was ready for a fight. I ignored him and focused on Sophie. "I know about the car, Sophie. I know you destroyed Lucas's Porsche to frame me." The color drained from her face. "I know about the money transfers. I know about the fake abuse allegations. I know about all of it. Dad, what I don't know is why. Why would you help your mother destroy me? Why would you commit felonies to frame your own father?" Sophie started crying, and Patricia immediately moved to comfort her. But I wasn't done. "Do you have any idea what you've done? Do you understand that vandalism and conspiracy and fraud are actual crimes? Do you realize that you could go to prison?" "She was protecting her mother," Patricia snapped. "From what? From finding out that his wife was cheating on him? From you." Sophie finally spoke, her voice shaking with anger and tears. "Mom said you'd try to destroy her if you found out. She said you'd take everything, that you'd make sure she lost her job and her friends and her reputation. She said the only way to protect herself was to make sure people understood what kind of man you really were. And what kind of man am I, Sophie? The kind who destroys people's lives when they don't do what you want. I stared at my daughter, this young woman I'd raised, supported, loved unconditionally for 19 years, and realized that Caroline had turned her into a weapon against me. Sophie, your mother cheated on me for years, not months, years. She stole money from our accounts. She lied to you, to me, to her employers, to everyone. And she convinced you to help her do it by making you think I was the bad guy. You are the bad guy, Sophie screamed. Look what you've done. Mom lost her job, her friends won't talk to her, Luke got deported, Jenna's marriage is ruined, all because you couldn't handle the fact that Mom found someone who actually appreciated her. I appreciated her. You ignored her. You took her for granted. You treated her like a maid and a babysitter instead of like a wife. Maybe that was true. Maybe I had been a neglectful husband. Maybe I had taken Caroline for granted. But that didn't justify what they'd done to me. Sophie, I said quietly, I'm going to ask you one more time. Where is the money your mother transferred out of our accounts? Sophie looked at her grandparents, then back at me. I don't know what you're talking about. The $80,000, Sophie. Where is it? I said I don't know. I pulled out my phone and showed her a bank statement Tommy had obtained. This shows transfers from our joint savings account to an account in your name. 47 separate transfers over the past year, totaling $63,000. Where is that money now? Sophie's face crumpled. It's gone. Gone where? Mom needed it for legal fees and living expenses and to pay Luke's debts. What debts? Robert Whitman cleared his throat. Jack, perhaps we should discuss this privately. What debts, Sophie? Luke owed money to some people in Chicago. Bad people. Mom used the money to pay them off so they wouldn't hurt him. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. Not only had Caroline stolen our life savings, she'd given it to her lover to pay off gambling debts or loan sharks or whatever other criminal obligations he'd accumulated. How much? I asked. All of it, Sophie whispered. All of what? All the money. The savings, the retirement accounts, even my real college fund. It's all gone. I sat down heavily in Robert Whitman's expensive chair and tried to process what I was hearing. Caroline hadn't just been planning to leave me. She'd been systematically looting our entire financial life to support her lover's criminal activities, and she'd used our daughter to do it. Sophie, I said, you need to understand something. Your mother didn't just cheat on me. She committed fraud, theft, and conspiracy. She used you to commit crimes. And now she's disappeared with all of our money. She didn't disappear. Where is she? Sophie was quiet. Where is your mother, Sophie? I don't know. When did you last talk to her? 3 days ago. What did she say? Sophie looked at her grandparents again, seeking permission or support, or maybe just hoping they'd make this conversation stop. She said she was sorry. She said things had gotten out of hand, and she was going to try to make it right. How was she going to make it right? She was going to pay the money back. With what money? She gave it all to Luke. She said she had a plan. I stood up, suddenly understanding exactly what Caroline's plan was. She's going to disappear, isn't she? She's going to take whatever money she has left, maybe meet up with Luke somewhere, and just vanish. Leave you to face the consequences of everything she convinced you to do. No, Sophie said, but her voice lacked conviction. Sophie, your mother used you. She manipulated you into thinking I was the villain so you'd help her steal from me and frame me for crimes. And now she's going to abandon you to face the legal consequences while she starts a new life somewhere else. That's not true. But even as she said it, I could see the doubt creeping into her eyes. I pulled out my phone and called Caroline's hotel. Caroline Morrison's room, please. I'm sorry, sir, but Ms. Morrison checked out 2 days ago. I hung up and looked at Sophie. When did you say you last talked to her? 3 days ago, Sophie whispered. She's gone, sweetheart. She checked out of the hotel 2 days ago and didn't tell you. Sophie started sobbing, and Patricia Whitman shot me a look that could have melted steel. You bastard, she hissed. Look what you've done to her. I didn't do this, Patricia. Your daughter did this. Your daughter stole our money, manipulated our child, and abandoned her to face the consequences alone. I knelt down in front of Sophie, forcing her to look at me. Sophie, I need you to listen to me very carefully. You've committed several felonies: vandalism, fraud, conspiracy, theft. If the police figure out what you've done, you could go to prison. The only way to protect yourself is to cooperate with the authorities and help them find your mother and recover the stolen money. I can't, she sobbed. I don't know where she is. Then we need to figure it out together. I stood up and faced Robert and Patricia Whitman. Here's what's going to happen. Sophie is going to come home with me. We're going to sit down with the police and a lawyer, and we're going to figure out how to fix this mess. And you two are going to help us, because your daughter has committed crimes that could destroy Sophie's entire future. We're not letting you take her anywhere, Robert said. You don't have a choice. Sophie is 19 years old, which makes her an adult. And more importantly, she's my daughter, not yours. I looked at Sophie one more time. You can come with me now and we can try to work this out, or you can stay here and wait for the police to figure it out on their own. But either way, this ends tonight. Sophie stood up slowly, wiping her eyes. I'm sorry, Dad, she whispered. I thought I was protecting Mom. I know, sweetheart. But now we need to protect you. As we walked out of the Whitman house, leaving Robert and Patricia standing in their perfect living room, looking like their world had just collapsed, I realized that this wasn't really about revenge anymore. This was about survival. Caroline had destroyed our family, stolen our money, and manipulated our daughter into committing crimes. Now she was gone, and Sophie and I were left to deal with the wreckage. But at least we were dealing with it together. And tomorrow, we were going to start hunting Caroline down and making her pay for what she'd done to us. All of it. Finding Caroline turned out to be easier than I'd expected. While Sophie slept in her old bedroom, the first time she'd been home in 2 weeks, I spent the night going through every document, every bank statement, every piece of paper Caroline had left behind. Tommy had taught me what to look for: patterns, connections, anything that might indicate where someone would go when they were trying to disappear. I found it in Caroline's jewelry box, hidden behind a false back I'd never noticed before. A safe deposit box key from a bank across town, along with a handwritten list of account numbers and passwords. At 8 a.m., I was waiting outside First National Bank with a court order Tommy had helped me obtain, demanding access to the safe deposit box registered in Caroline's name. What I found inside made everything clear. Passport photos of Caroline with different hair colors, copies of birth certificates for identities I didn't recognize, bank routing numbers for accounts in the Cayman Islands, and most damning of all, a detailed timeline of her plan to disappear, written in her own handwriting. Phase 1, establish pattern of abusive behavior, complete. Phase 2, transfer assets to secure accounts, complete. Phase 3, create legal justification for departure, in progress. Phase 4, relocate to non-extradition jurisdiction, pending. At the bottom of the timeline, an address in Costa Rica and a phone number. I called the number from the bank parking lot. It rang twice before a familiar voice answered. Hola? Hello, Caroline. Silence. Jack, how did I find you? You left a road map in your safe deposit box. Did you really think I'd never look for it? Jack, please, let me explain. Explain what? How you've been planning to abandon Sophie and me for over a year. How you stole our entire life savings to pay your lover's gambling debts. How you turned our daughter into a criminal to cover your tracks. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. How was it supposed to happen, Caroline? You were just going to disappear one day and leave Sophie to face fraud charges alone? Sophie was never supposed to get involved. That was Jenna's idea. Don't you dare blame Jenna for what you did to our daughter. Caroline was crying now, but I felt no sympathy for her tears. Not anymore. Jack, I made mistakes. Terrible mistakes, but I can fix this. I can make it right. How? The money's gone, isn't it? You gave it all to Luke. Not all of it. I still have some. I can pay back what Sophie took. Sophie didn't take anything, Caroline. You took it. You used our daughter's name and accounts, but you're the one who stole from us. I was scared. You were greedy. There's a difference. I hung up and immediately called Ray. I found her, I said. Costa Rica. And I have evidence of everything. The money transfers, the fake identities, the whole plan. Jack, you need to be careful here. If you've obtained evidence illegally, I haven't. Everything I have came from a safe deposit box I have legal access to as Caroline's husband. Everything is admissible. What do you want to do? I want to bring her home. I want her to face charges for what she's done. And I want our money back. Extradition from Costa Rica isn't easy. Then we make it easy. We make it so expensive and difficult for her to stay hidden that coming home becomes her best option. Over the next 3 days, I launched a campaign that made my previous efforts look like amateur hour. I contacted the FBI's Financial Crimes Division and provided them with evidence of Caroline's money laundering and identity fraud. I contacted the Costa Rican authorities and provided them with evidence that Caroline was in their country under false pretenses. I contacted every bank, every credit card company, every financial institution Caroline had ever used, and provided them with evidence of fraudulent transactions. Most importantly, I went public. I called the local newspaper and gave them the whole story. Not the version where I was the abusive husband driving my wife into another man's arms, but the real version, backed up by documentation. The version where a successful lawyer had systematically looted her family's finances, manipulated her teenage daughter into committing crimes, and fled the country to avoid prosecution. The story ran on the front page with the headline, "Local Attorney Flees Country After Alleged Fraud Scheme." Within hours, it had been picked up by regional news outlets. By the end of the day, it was trending on social media. Caroline called me that evening, screaming, "You bastard! You've destroyed me! No one will ever hire me again! My reputation is ruined!" "Good," I said calmly. "Now you know how it feels. Jack, please, I'll come home. I'll face the charges. I'll cooperate with the authorities. Just make it stop." "It's too late for that, Caroline. You made your choice when you decided to steal from us and use Sophie as your accomplice. What do you want from me? I want you to suffer the way you made me suffer. I want you to lose everything the way you made me lose everything. I want you to know what it feels like to have the person you trusted most in the world betray you completely. I never meant for it to go this far, but it did go this far. And now you get to live with the consequences." I hung up and turned to Sophie, who had been listening to the conversation with tears streaming down her face. "Is that really what you want, Dad? For Mom to suffer?" "What I want is for your mother to come home and face the consequences of what she's done. What I want is for our money to be returned so you can still go to college. What I want is for the truth to come out, so everyone knows that you're a victim in this, not a criminal. But you do want her to suffer." I thought about that question for a long moment. "Yes," I said finally. "I do want her to suffer, because she made us suffer, and she didn't care. She was willing to destroy our entire family to get what she wanted, and she was going to leave you to face the consequences alone." Sophie nodded slowly. "I know. I figured that out when she stopped answering my calls." "She stopped answering your calls?" 3 days ago, right after you found her in Costa Rica. I think she realized that I was more of a liability than an asset." I pulled Sophie into a hug, and for the first time in weeks, she didn't pull away. "We're going to get through this," I told her. We're going to get our money back, we're going to clear your name, and we're going to rebuild our lives. What about Mom? Your mother made her choice. Now she gets to live with it. The next morning brought news that made everything worth it. Caroline had been arrested at the San Jose airport trying to board a flight to Switzerland. The Costa Rican authorities, responding to pressure from the FBI and facing media scrutiny about harboring American fugitives, had decided that Caroline Morrison was more trouble than she was worth. She would be extradited within the week. But the best news came from Tommy, who had been tracking the money trail. She didn't spend it all, he told me over the phone. Luke's debts were real, but they were only about $30,000. The rest of the money, nearly $50,000, is sitting in a Cayman Islands account that Caroline thought was untraceable. Can we get it back? Already in progress. The FBI is freezing the account as part of their investigation. You should have access to it within a month. I hung up and walked into the kitchen where Sophie was making coffee. Your mother's coming home, I told her. Sophie's face went pale. What's going to happen to her? She's going to be charged with fraud, theft, money laundering, and probably a dozen other things. She's going to go to prison, Sophie. And what's going to happen to me? You're going to cooperate with the authorities, testify against your mother if necessary, and hopefully avoid any serious charges. You were manipulated by an adult who should have protected you instead of using you. Sophie started crying again, and I held her while she sobbed. I'm sorry, Dad. I'm so sorry for everything. I know, sweetheart. We're going to get through this. 3 days later, Caroline was back in the county jail, awaiting trial on 14 felony charges. I went to see her exactly once. She looked terrible. Her hair was unwashed, her skin pale, her designer clothes replaced with an orange jumpsuit. She looked like what she was, a criminal facing the consequences of her actions. Jack, she said when she saw me through the visiting room glass. Thank you for coming. I didn't come to reconcile, Caroline. I came to tell you something. What? Sophie's going to testify against you. She's going to tell the court exactly how you manipulated her, exactly how you used her to commit crimes, exactly how you were planning to abandon her to face the consequences alone. Caroline's face crumpled. She's my daughter. She was your daughter. Now she's my daughter. And I'm going to protect her from you the way I should have been protecting her all along. Jack, please. You destroyed our family, Caroline. You stole our money, corrupted our daughter, and tried to frame me for crimes I didn't commit. And when your plan started falling apart, you were ready to abandon Sophie and let her go to prison to protect yourself. That's not true. It is true. And now, everyone's going to know it. I stood up to leave, then turned back one more time. By the way, the house is going up for sale next week. Sophie and I are moving to Florida, where no one knows our story. We're going to start over, and we're going to be happy. You can't take Sophie away from me. I'm not taking her away from you, Caroline. You threw her away when you decided your boyfriend was more important than your family. I walked out of that jail and never looked back. 6 months later, Caroline pled guilty to 12 felony charges and was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison. Sophie testified at the sentencing hearing, telling the judge exactly how her mother had manipulated her and used her to commit crimes. The judge was not sympathetic to Caroline's claims that she had been driven to crime by an abusive marriage. We got most of our money back, not all of it, but enough for Sophie to finish college and for me to start over. Sophie and I moved to Tampa, where I opened my own garage and she enrolled at the University of South Florida. We don't talk about Caroline much, but when we do, it's with the understanding that we survived something terrible together and came out stronger. Jenna Kowalski's marriage didn't survive the scandal, but she landed on her feet. Last I heard, she was dating a nice accountant and had started her own marketing firm. Lucas Beaumont was permanently banned from entering the United States and faced his own legal troubles in France related to the money Caroline had given him. As for me, I learned that revenge is a dish best served systematically, with documentation, and through proper legal channels. But mostly, I learned that sometimes the people who betray you do you a favor by showing you who they really are. Caroline Morrison thought she was smart enough to destroy my life and get away with it. She was wrong. And now she has 8 years in federal prison to think about exactly how wrong she was. Justice isn't always swift, but when it comes, it's thorough.